An inquiry has recommended that the victims of the infected blood scandal should receive immediate compensation of at least £100,000 each. Its chairman, Sir Brian Langstaff, said there was a compelling case for the payments to be made without delay, which would alleviate the suffering of those affected. With more than 4,000 surviving victims, the interim settlement could reach £400 million. At least 2,400 people died after contracting HIV or hepatitis C through NHS treatments using contaminated blood products in the 1970s and 80s. A government spokesman said ministers would consider the recommendation and respond as soon as possible. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
Survivors of the contaminated blood scandal and their dependents have so far only received what are called annual support payments, but have not had any compensation for loss of earnings, care costs or other lifetime losses until now. So this is a significant statement by the judge who is chairing the public inquiry into how tens of thousands of NHS patients with haemophilia and other blood disorders were infected with blood-borne diseases such as hepatitis and HIV. The scandal dates back to the mid-1970s when a new blood plasma treatment was introduced. At the time, the medication was imported from the United States, where it was made from the pooled blood plasma of thousands of paid donors, including some in high-risk groups such as prisoners. If a single donor was infected with a blood-borne virus such as hepatitis or HIV, then the whole batch of medication could be contaminated. An unknown number of UK patients were also exposed to hepatitis B or C through a blood transfusion after childbirth or hospital surgery. This afternoon, Sir Brian Langstaff told the inquiry that he'd concluded some compensation should be paid now, rather than waiting for the inquiry to finish its work.
I'm obliged to recognise that the practical way to make payments swiftly is to do so through the current infected blood support schemes. And that's why I've decided to recommend that interim payments of no less than £100,000 are made to all the infected people and all the bereaved partners who are currently registered with the schemes, and those who register between now and the inception of any future scheme.
This is only a recommendation. It's up to the government whether to accept it or not. But the former Health Secretary Matt Hancock, when giving evidence to the inquiry last year, said the government would pay compensation if that was what the inquiry recommended, agreeing there was a moral responsibility on the part of the state to address what had happened. And for those who are still living with the consequences of this health disaster, like Richard Warwick, who was infected with HIV and 2 forms of hepatitis as a young boy in 1978 after being given infected blood, this is a significant moment.
It's the affirmation that wrong was done to our community, and finally, after all this time, it's recognition of the harm that's been done to us.
The payments to more than 4,000 survivors and bereaved partners are recommended to be at least £100,000 each, putting the bill at more than £400 million. But this is only an interim settlement, made immediately because so many survivors are in ill health. The final compensation bill at the end of the inquiry is likely to run into billions.
Des Collins is a solicitor representing around 1,500 victims of the contaminated blood scandal. He told the World Tonight that the payments recommended by the judge should be made straight away.
Matt Hancock, when he was Health Secretary last summer, appeared before the inquiry. He was quite adamant that if at any stage compensation was recommended by the inquiry, that the government would pay it. Now, we'll be back out there on Monday morning to try and put as much pressure as we can on the government to make that payment immediately. And when I say immediately, I don't mean within 3 months, I mean immediately.